The bell rang for lunch, signaling the chaotic release of hundreds of students from the classrooms of Northwood High. For most, this was the best part of the day, a time to laugh, gossip, and rush to the cafeteria to secure the best tables. But for Lily, the sound of the bell was like a starting gun for a race she never wanted to run. She pulled her dark gray hoodie tighter around herself, lowering her head as she stepped into the crowded hallway. It wasn't that she was invisible. In fact, her tendency to hide often made her stand out more. She was the girl who sat in the back corner, the one who never raised her hand, and the one people forgot was there as soon as she left the room. The hallway was a loud river of noise. Lockers slammed shut. Shouts of "wait up" echoed off the walls. Groups of friends stood in tight circles, creating obstacles that Lily had to navigate like a ghost. She kept her eyes fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor, counting the tiles just to keep her mind off the feeling of so many people being so close. She could feel the vibrations of their footsteps and the rush of air as they ran past. To them, she was just quiet Lily, the weird girl who wore headphones even when they weren't, playing music, and who always looked like she was waiting for something bad to happen. Lily's destination wasn't the cafeteria. She couldn't handle the noise and the social games that were played there. Instead, she turned down a quieter corridor that led to the arts wing of the school. The air smelled different here, less like floor wax and teenage sweat, and more like old paper and dust. This was her sanctuary. She pushed open the heavy door to the music room, and the silence instantly wrapped around her like a warm blanket. The room was empty, save for a few instruments resting on stands and a large grand piano that sat in the corner. Looking imposing and majestic, she walked over to the piano and sat on the bench, running her fingers lightly over the cold keys. This was the only place where Lily felt like she was bigger than her small, anxious body. In the hallway, she was a target for whispers, even if they weren't always mean. Sometimes the silence people treated her with was worse than bullying. It was like she didn't exist. But here, with the piano, she had a voice. It was a voice that didn't need words. She could be angry, sad, joyful, or powerful, and no one could stop her. However, this year, the sanctuary felt different. The school was buzzing with excitement about the upcoming annual talent showcase. It was the biggest event of the semester, a night where the social hierarchy of the school was put on display. The popular kids planned their routines months in advance. The cheerleaders would do a dance, the football captain would tell jokes, and the theater kids would perform scenes from famous plays. For someone like Lily, the talent show was something to watch from the safety of the shadows, if she even went at all. As Lily sat there, trying to find a melody to calm her nerves, the door creaked open. It was Mr. Vance, the music teacher. He was an older man with kind eyes that seemed to see right through people's defenses. He was carrying a stack of papers and paused when he saw Lily. He didn't ask her why she was hiding in his room during lunch. He never did. He just smiled and walked over to a table near the piano. "The sign-up sheet for the showcase is up, Lily," he said casually. Tapping the stack of papers on the table to straighten them, Lily pulled her hands back from the keys as if she had been burned. "I know," she whispered. "I saw it in the hallway." Mr. Vance leaned against the table, looking at her. "We need piano acts this year. It's mostly singing and dancing. A lot of noise, but not a lot of music." He waited for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. "You have a gift. I've heard you playing in here after school." Lily shook her head quickly, her heart starting to beat faster. "No, I can't. I'm not performing. Why not?" "People will laugh," she said, her voice barely audible. "They don't even know I play. If I go up there, it will be weird." "It's only weird if you make it weird," Mr. Vance said gently. "Music isn't about who you are in the hallways, Lily. It's about what you have to say. If you play like I know you can, they won't be laughing. They'll be listening." Lily looked down at her shoes. She wanted to believe him. She dreamed about standing on that stage and letting the sound fill the room, demanding respect without having to say a word. But the reality of her life at school was heavy. She wasn't one of them. She was the girl who tripped over her own feet in gym class. She was the girl who sat alone at assemblies. If she walked out on that stage, the expectation wouldn't be talent. It would be failure. Just think about it, Mr. Vance said, walking back to his office door. The sheet is on the wall outside the gym. Deadline is this Friday. The rest of the week was a blur of anxiety for Lily. Every time she walked past the sign-up sheet taped to the wall near the gymnasium, her stomach turned. It was covered in names. She recognized many of them: Tyler, the class president who was doing a magic trick; Brittany, the head cheerleader who was leading a group dance; and a bunch of other names that belonged to people who seemed to live in the sunlight while Lily lived in the shade. By Thursday, the gossip mill was in full swing. Lily heard snippets of conversations as she ate her sandwich on a bench outside, away from the crowds. "Did you hear Tyler is doing fire tricks?" One girl said. "I bet Brittany is going to wear those really expensive sparkly outfits," another replied. There was no room for a quiet girl with a hoodie in these conversations. If she signed her name, it would stick out like a sore thumb. It would be a target. Friday morning arrived with a gray, drizzly rain that matched Lily's mood. She walked through the school, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. Mr. Vance had caught her eye earlier in the hallway and given her a small nod. It was a silent encouragement, but it felt like a push during her break period. Lily found herself standing in front of the sign-up sheet. The hallway was surprisingly empty for a moment. She looked at the list of names. They were written in bold, confident handwriting. Some were even written in bright-colored markers. Lily pulled a pen from her pocket. It was a cheap black ballpoint pen with chewed-up cap. Her hand hovered over the paper. "What are you doing?" The voice made Lily jump. She turned around to see a group of 3 girls standing there, carrying gym bags. It was Brittany and 2 of her friends. They were looking at Lily with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. I was just looking," Lily stammered. Stepping back from the wall, Brittany stepped closer, glancing at the paper and then back at Lily. "Are you going to sign up?" "For the talent show?" Lily felt her face get hot. "No, I mean maybe. You?" One of the other girls giggled. "What are you going to do? Stand there and not say anything?" The group laughed. It wasn't evil, cackling laughter, but it was sharp enough to cut. It was the laugh of people who were confident in their place in the world, and found it funny that someone from the bottom was trying to climb up. "Come on." "Leave her alone," Brittany said, though she was still smirking. "It's a free country. If she wants to go up there and have a panic attack, let her." They walked away, their laughter fading down the hall. Lily stood frozen for a moment. The fear in her chest was suffocating. They expected a disaster. Even the thought of her signing up was a joke to them. If she actually performed, they would be waiting for her to mess up. They would be ready to film it on their phones and laugh about it on Monday. She looked back at the paper. The rain tapped against the windows. Her hand was shaking, but a sudden spark of anger lit up inside her. She was tired of being the joke. She was tired of being the disaster that hadn't even happened yet. Mr. Vance was right. She did have a voice. And if she was going to be judged anyway, she wanted them to judge her for something real, not just for being the quiet girl. Lily stepped forward. She ignored the colorful, confident names above. She found an empty spot at the bottom of the page. With a deep breath, she pressed the pen to the paper and wrote her name, Lily. It looked small and plain compared to the others, but it was there. She quickly capped her pen and turned away, walking as fast as she could toward the music room. Her heart was hammering against her ribs so hard it hurt. She didn't know if she was brave or stupid. Behind her in the hallway, the bell rang. Students poured out of classrooms, flooding the corridor. A few minutes later, a freshman stopped by the gym wall to check the list. He scanned the big names, the stars of the school, and then his eyes drifted to the bottom. He squinted at the unfamiliar name written in black ink. "Lily?" he said out loud to his friend. "Who is that?" "I don't know," his friend replied, not even looking up from his phone. "Probably some nerd. It's going to be a total disaster." The rumor started small, just like that. By the time Lily got home that afternoon, the whispers had already begun to spread through the text chains and group chats of Northwood High. The quiet girl had signed up. The girl no one really knew had put her name on the list. And the consensus was clear: the class expected a disaster. They were preparing themselves for a cringe-worthy performance, a moment of awkward silence that they would all talk about for weeks. They had no idea that the disaster they were expecting was about to become the thing that changed everything. The week following the sign-up sheet felt like the longest week of Lily's life. It was as if by writing her name on that piece of paper, she had unknowingly agreed to be the main character in a play she hadn't rehearsed for. The school, usually indifferent to her existence, suddenly seemed to have its eyes everywhere. In the hallways, groups of students would huddle together, glancing in her direction as she walked by. She could feel their eyes burning into her back, heavy with judgment and curiosity. Rumors travel fast in high school, and the truth often gets bent out of shape. By Tuesday, the story wasn't just that Lily had signed up. It was that she was planning to do something outrageous. "I heard she's going to recite poetry in a different language," one whispered to another as they stood at their lockers. "No, my friend said she's going to try to sing, but she can't even carry a tune in the shower," someone else replied during gym class. The narrative was set. This wasn't going to be a performance. It was going to be a disaster. The student body was preparing themselves for a moment of second-hand embarrassment. They were almost excited about it in a cruel way, because watching someone fail was often more entertaining than watching someone succeed. Lily tried to block it out. She kept her headphones on, even when the music wasn't playing, just to create a barrier between herself and the noise. But she couldn't ignore the rehearsals. Northwood High was buzzing with preparation for the showcase. During lunch breaks and after school, the cafeteria and the gym were taken over by the real performers. One afternoon, Lily walked past the gym on her way to the music room. The doors were open, and inside, the dance team was practicing. The music was loud, bass-heavy pop that shook the floorboards. Brittany, the head cheerleader, was at the front counting out steps. 5, 6, 7, 8, she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. The girls moved in perfect synchronization, their uniforms bright and flashy. They looked confident, like they owned the world. Outside the door, a group of boys sat on the bleachers, watching and cheering. It was a scene of pure popularity and social power. Lily paused for just a second, watching the blur of color and energy. It felt like a different planet compared to the dusty silence of the music room. She continued down the hall to her sanctuary. When she opened the door to the music room, the contrast was jarring. It was quiet, dim, and smelled of wood polish. This was where Lily spent every free moment she had. While others were practicing high-energy routines to impress their friends, Lily was locked in a battle with her own fears. Mr. Vance, the music teacher, had given her a key to the side door so she could practice without interruption. He knew she needed the privacy. For the first few days, Lily struggled. Her hands would shake as she placed them on the keys. She would play a few notes, then stop, imagining the hundreds of eyes staring at her in the dark auditorium. The thought made her stomach turn. She imagined tripping on the cable to the microphone. She imagined hitting a wrong note and hearing the ripple of laughter from the back row. The pressure was making her doubt everything. "You're playing too tight," Mr. Vance said gently, walking into the room on Wednesday afternoon. He had been listening from the hallway. "You're fighting the piano. You're thinking about the audience, not the music." Lily looked up, her eyes tired. "I can't help it. Everyone is saying I'm going to mess up. I feel like they're just waiting for me to fall off the stage." Mr. Vance pulled a chair over and sat next to her. "Let them wait," he said. "The people out there, the ones whispering, they want you to be predictable. They want the quiet girl to be quiet. They want the girl nobody notices to stay unnoticed. If you go out there and play safe, you're boring. But if you go out there and play like your life depends on it, you change the rules." He pointed to the sheet music on the stand. It was a difficult piece, full of fast runs and heavy chords. It wasn't a gentle, pretty lullaby. It was a storm, Play it like you're angry at them, Mr. Vance suggested with a small smile. Play it like you have something to prove? Lily looked at the keys. Something clicked in her mind. She thought about the whispers in the hallway. She thought about the way people looked through her as if she were invisible. She thought about the feeling of being small. A spark of determination lit up inside her chest. She took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. This time she didn't hold back. She struck the first chord hard, the sound echoing through the room. She played the opening passage fast and loud. The music was aggressive and demanding. She wasn't the shy girl in the hoodie anymore. She was a force of nature. Her fingers flew across the keys, hitting every note with precision and anger. The music swelled, filling the empty room, drowning out her anxieties. Mr. Vance didn't say a word. He just sat back and listened, a look of deep approval on his face. This was the side of Lily the school didn't know. The girl who played with passion, with fire, with a raw intensity that was impossible to ignore. As the week went on, Lily's practice sessions became her escape. She stopped worrying about what the popular kids were doing in the gym. She stopped worrying about the rumors. She realized that while they were busy performing for the attention, she was busy preparing something real. She started to understand that the piano was her weapon. It was the only way she could speak loud enough to make them listen. However, the outside world didn't stop turning. The anticipation for the showcase was reaching a fever pitch. Posters were plastered on every wall. Talent showcase, Friday night, be there? They screamed in bright colors. During morning announcements, the principal reminded everyone to buy tickets. The excitement was palpable. In the cafeteria, a group of seniors were sitting around a table, eating pizza and talking about the show. "I'm only going for the band," one guy said. "They're actually good." "Yeah, but I want to see that girl Lily," a girl at the table said, laughing. "It's going to be a train wreck. I'm bringing my phone to record it. It's going to be legendary." They all laughed. It was casual cruelty, the kind that happens easily in high school where status is everything. They had already decided the ending of the story. In their minds, Lily was a joke. The stage was too big for her, the spotlight too bright. They couldn't wait to see her fail because it would confirm everything they believed about the social order. That the people on top stay on top, and the people at the bottom stay there. They had no idea that while they were laughing, Lily was in the music room, playing a piece of music so complex and powerful that it would shatter their expectations. The school was expecting a disaster. They were expecting silence and awkwardness. They were preparing to laugh at the girl who didn't belong, but the gap between what they expected and what was coming was growing wider every day. Lily wasn't practicing to be funny. She wasn't practicing to be a filler act between the dancers and the comedians. She was practicing to blow the roof off the place. She was finding a strength she didn't know she had, fueled by the very people who doubted her. The whispers of doubt had become the fuel for her fire, and by Friday afternoon, the fire was burning bright. The stage was set, the players were ready, but only Lily and Mr. Vance knew that the script was about to be completely rewritten. Friday night finally arrived, bringing with it a mix of humidity and tension that seemed to hang over Northwood High, the school gymnasium. Usually smelling of sweat and floor wax had been transformed for the annual talent showcase. Bright stage lights cut through the darkness of the hall, illuminating a heavy red curtain and a shiny black grand piano sitting center stage. Folding chairs had been set up for the audience, and they were filling up fast. The air buzzed with excitement, the sound of hundreds of people talking, laughing, and finding their seats, creating a low roar for the popular crowd. This was their night. Brittany and her friends sat in the front row, wearing matching outfits and checking their hair in the mirrors of their compact cases. They were ready to perform their dance routine, confident they would steal the show. But there was another energy in the room, a darker, more curious one. Throughout the week, the rumor that the quiet girl was performing had spread like wildfire. Students who usually didn't care about the talent show were buying tickets just to see if the rumors were true. They were ready for entertainment, but not the kind the school brochure advertised. They were expecting a spectacle of failure. Backstage, the atmosphere was completely different. It was cramped, hot, and smelled of hairspray and nervous sweat. Lily stood in the corner, far away from the groups of chatting dancers and comedians. She felt like she was going to throw up. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing her hoodie. She wore a simple, light blue blouse and black dress pants. It felt strange to have her arms exposed, to not have the fabric to hide behind. She felt naked, as if everyone could see her heartbeat thumping against her ribs. Mr. Vance, the music teacher, walked by, carrying a clipboard. He stopped in front of her and gave her a steady look. "Remember what I said?" he said quietly, so the others wouldn't hear. "Don't play for them. Play for yourself. Let the rest take care of itself." Lily nodded, clutching her hands together to stop them from shaking. "I'll try," she whispered. "Try is for amateurs," he smiled gently. "You know this piece. Just trust your hands." Out in the auditorium, the lights dimmed. The crowd noise hushed, and the principal walked onto the stage to welcome everyone. He spoke into the microphone, his voice booming through the speakers, welcoming the parents and teachers. He talked about school spirit and talent. Then, the show began. The first few acts were exactly what everyone expected. A group of choir students sang a pop song. They were good, but safe. Then came a magician who fumbled a card trick, causing a few awkward laughs. Then the dance team took the stage. The music exploded, bass shaking the floor, and Brittany led her team through a high-energy routine. The crowd went wild. The students screamed their names, clapping along to the beat. It was polished, flashy, and confident. When they finished, the applause was deafening, but as the night went on, the mood shifted. The audience was getting restless. They knew who was coming. Between acts, you could hear people whispering, "Is she next? Do you think she even come out? I've got my camera ready." The anticipation was building, but it wasn't the kind that hopes for greatness. It was the kind you feel when you drive past a car accident you have to look, even though you know it's going to be bad. Finally, the intermission ended. The lights came back up, and the student MC, a senior with a big smile, walked back to the microphone. He looked down at his card, paused for a second, and then looked out at the crowd. "All right, for our next act," he said, his voice echoing. "Please welcome Lily." A strange sound rolled through the gymnasium. It was a mixture of clapping, a few cheers, and a lot of giggling. It was the sound of 300 people preparing to cringe. The spotlight operator aimed the bright beam toward the side of the stage. The heavy side door creaked open. Lily stepped into the light. The walk from the side of the stage to the piano felt like a mile long. The heat from the spotlight hit her face instantly, blinding her. She couldn't see the audience clearly. She just saw a dark void in front of her, punctuated by the glint of cell phone screens. The light made her feel like she was under a microscope, exposing every freckle, every nervous breath. Her legs felt heavy, like lead weights were attached to her ankles. She could hear the murmurs getting louder as she walked. "Oh my God, look at her," someone whispered loudly. "She looks terrified." A few people laughed. It wasn't a full-on booing, but it was worse. It was a dismissal. They had already decided she wasn't worth their time. Lily kept her eyes focused on the piano. It was the only solid thing in the room. If she looked at the crowd, she would freeze. She knew that she reached the piano bench. The wood of the piano felt cool and reassuring under her fingertips. She sat down and adjusted the bench. It made a tiny squeak that echoed through the microphone, sending a ripple of snickers through the crowd. Lily felt her face burn with embarrassment. She was the awkward girl they thought she was. The disaster was happening before she even played a note. She lifted the lid of the piano, exposing the strings. She placed her feet on the pedals. The gym was quiet now, but it was a tense, heavy silence. You could feel the collective breath being held. It felt like the entire school was leaning forward, waiting for her to mess up, waiting for her to start crying and run off stage. The phones were raised higher now, recording every second of her humiliation. Brittany sat in the front row, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. She was waiting for the train wreck. She had already planned what she was going to say to her friends about it later. Lily looked at the black and white keys. They blurred for a second as her eyes watered. She thought about the hallway, the whispers, the years of being invisible. She thought about Mr. Vance telling her to play like she was angry. She took a deep, shaky breath that expanded her lungs. She closed her eyes. For a moment, time stopped. The jeering faces in her mind vanished. The expectations of the crowd disappeared. There was only the rhythm in her head and the feeling of the keys beneath her fingers. She wasn't the quiet girl anymore. She was a musician, and the storm was about to break. The silence in the gymnasium was absolute, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, thick with anticipation and the mean-spirited energy of 300 students waiting for a joke to land. Lily sat on the bench, her back straight but her insides churning. The bright spotlight blinded her to the faces in the crowd, turning them into a dark, blurry mass. She knew they were there. She could feel their eyes digging into her skin, waiting for her to falter, to stutter, or to play a wrong note so they could laugh. She placed her shaking hands on the keys. For a split second, the doubt tried to creep back in. "You don't belong here," the voice in her head whispered. "They are going to destroy you." But then she took a deep breath, and Mr. Vance's words echoed in her mind. "Play like you're angry." Lily didn't start soft. She didn't ease into it. She slammed her hands down on the keys, striking the opening chord with such force that the sound seemed to slap the audience in the face. It wasn't a tentative, polite piano lesson sound. It was a roar. The grand piano vibrated against the floorboards, sending a hum through the solace of the audience's shoes. In the front row, Brittany jumped slightly in her seat, her smirk vanishing instantly. This wasn't what she expected. The noise was aggressive, loud, and demanding. Lily didn't stop. As soon as the first chord faded, her fingers were flying. She launched into the complicated piece Mr. Vance had helped her choose. It was a storm of notes, fast and rhythmic. To anyone watching, it was clear immediately that this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a girl who had accidentally wandered onto the stage. This was a musician. The reaction in the gym started at the front and moved to the back like a wave. The giggles died in people's throats. The whispers cut off abruptly. One boy in the third row, who had his phone raised to record a fail video, slowly lowered his hand. He forgot to press stop. He just stared, his mouth slightly open. The music was too complex, too fast to be background noise. It demanded attention. Lily was lost in the sound. The spotlight that had felt like a burning spotlight of shame now felt like the sun. She wasn't the quiet girl in the hoodie anymore. She wasn't the girl who tripped in gym class. With every strike of the keys, she was hitting back at every rumor, every whisper, and every laugh she had endured over the years. She poured her anxiety into the speed of the notes and her frustration into the heavy bass chords. The piece was difficult. Her left hand jumped across the lower keys while her right hand danced intricate patterns on the high notes. It required a focus that blocked out the entire world. There was no audience, no school, no bullies. There was only the rhythm, the vibration of the strings, and the swell of the music. Her body swayed with the instrument, her movements sharp and intense. She was hitting the keys so hard that her arms ached, but she didn't care. She played with a fury that shocked everyone watching, the teachers, who usually sat in the back grading papers during the talent show. Stood up, Mrs. Gable, the strict math teacher, put down her red pen and adjusted her glasses, leaning forward to see the stage better. Even the principal, who was usually bored by the student acts, stopped checking his watch. The sound filling the gym was professional. It was raw talent that no one knew existed. Brittany sat frozen. She looked at the stage, her eyes wide. She had prepared herself to feel superior, to feel pity for the weird girl struggling on stage. But looking at Lily, now fierce, focused, and undeniably brilliant, Brittany felt a strange sensation she wasn't used to. She felt small. For the first time, the spotlight wasn't on her or her friends. It was on the person they had all underestimated, and the power was shifting. As the song reached its middle section, the tempo increased. It was a blur of sound, a cascade of notes that sounded like rain pouring down on a tin roof, mixed with thunder. The audience was mesmerized. The judgment had evaporated, replaced by a collective awe. The student body was realizing that the disaster they were waiting for wasn't happening. In fact, it was the opposite. This was the best performance of the night. A hush had fallen over the room that was completely different from the tense silence before. Before, the silence was waiting for failure. Now the silence was respect. They were afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid to miss a single note. You could hear the squeak of a sneaker on the gym floor or the rustle of a candy wrapper, but mostly you just heard the piano singing. Lily's fingers were beginning to ache, but she pushed through. She was approaching the climax of the piece. She thought about the way people looked through her in the hallways. She thought about the lunch hours she spent alone. She poured all that loneliness into the music, turning it into something beautiful that everyone could understand. Music, she realized in that moment, was the only language where she didn't have to be shy. The piano spoke for her, and it was screaming that she mattered. She leaned forward, her hair falling out of place, sweat forming on her forehead. She didn't care how she looked. The music was taking her to a place where popularity didn't exist. The final run of notes was approaching a rapid-fire assault on the high keys that required absolute precision. She played it perfectly. Her hands moved faster than the eye could follow, a blur of motion. Then she brought her hands down for the final series of chords. Boom, boom, boom. Each one was louder and deeper than the last, shaking the very air in the room, and then silence. Lily pulled her hands away from the keys and let them hover in the air for a split second. She was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The adrenaline was pumping through her veins so fast that her ears were ringing. She sat there, staring at the keys, waiting for the room to come back into focus. For 3 seconds, there was absolute stillness in the gymnasium. No one moved. No one spoke. The echo of the final chord faded into the rafters. The silence stretched out, heavy and electric. Lily's heart dropped. Had she messed up? Was it actually bad? Were they just too shocked to boo? She slowly started to lower her hands to her lap, preparing to stand up and walk off the stage to the sound of her own failure. She felt the heat rising in her face again, the embarrassment returning, but then a single pair of hands clapped. It came from the side of the stage. Mr. Vance. He was standing in the wings, beaming with pride. Then another person joined in. A student in the front row. Then the sound broke. The silence shattered like glass. It started as a ripple and then turned into a roar. The entire gymnasium erupted. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a screaming, stomping, standing ovation. Students jumped to their feet, cheering at the top of their lungs. Phones that had been lowered were raised again, but this time to record something amazing. Lily sat frozen on the bench, blinking in the bright light. She looked up, squinting past the spotlight. She saw a wall of people standing. She saw Brittany clapping, a look of genuine shock on her face. She saw the math teacher wiping a tear from her eye. The noise was deafening, a wall of sound that washed over her. Pushing away the years of being invisible, she stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, like jelly, but she forced herself to stand. She gave a small, awkward bow. She didn't know what to do with her hands. The cheering got louder. The Volf whistles started. For the first time in her life, the school wasn't laughing at her. They were cheering for her. The disaster had completely changed everything. The roar of the crowd was still ringing in Lily's ears as she walked off the stage. Her legs felt like they might give out at any second, and her heart was beating so hard she could see it thumping against the fabric of her blouse. As soon as she stepped into the shadows of the wings, out of the harsh spotlight, the adrenaline that had been keeping her standing started to fade, replaced by a shaky, trembling feeling. Mr. Vance was waiting for her just a few steps away. He didn't say anything at first. He simply opened his arms and gave her a tight hug. It was the kind of hug a parent gives a child when they are proud, not just of what they did, but of who they are becoming. Lily buried her face in his jacket for a moment, letting the tears she had been holding back finally spill over. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. She had done it. She had survived the storm, and she had come out the other side. "You did it, Lily," Mr. Vance whispered, patting her on the back. I told you. They weren't ready for that. Lily pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I thought they were going to hate it. Listen, Mr. Vance said, gesturing toward the stage curtain. The applause was still going on, mixed with shouts of encore from the students. Does that sound like hate? She listened to the sound. It was loud and chaotic, but it was full of energy. It was the sound of 300 people having their expectations shattered. Lily took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She went to the side of the stage and peeked out through the heavy velvet curtain. The gymnasium looked different than it had before. The audience was on their feet. Phones were everywhere, but now they were recording the performance to show people how good it was. Not to mock a failure, the rest of the talent show went by in a blur for Lily. She sat on a wooden crate in the wings, watching the other acts perform. There was a band that played rock music and a comedian who told jokes. They were all good, but the energy in the room had changed. Lily's performance had set a bar that was high, and everyone knew it. When the show finally ended and the house lights came up, the students didn't rush for the exits immediately. They were buzzing about the piano girl. Groups of people were huddled together, talking animatedly. Did you see her hands? One person asked. I didn't know she could play like that, said another. Walking out of the gym that night felt different than walking in. As Lily walked toward the exit, students stepped aside to let her pass. Some of them nodded at her. A few even smiled or gave her a thumbs up. It wasn't that she had suddenly become the most popular girl in school, but she wasn't invisible anymore. She had been seen, truly seen, and she had been understood. Saturday and Sunday passed slowly for Lily. She spent most of the time in her room, reliving the moments on stage over and over again. She was terrified that Monday morning would bring a return to reality, that the magic of Friday night would wear off, and she would just be the quiet girl again. But deep down, she knew something had shifted inside her. She had faced her biggest fear and conquered it. She felt a new sense of confidence that she hadn't felt before. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and rain, a typical gloomy start to the week. Lily walked into school with her hood up, her old habit of hiding kicking in automatically. But as she walked down the hallway, she noticed something was different. The hallway wasn't just a sea of faces she needed to avoid. It was a place where she had made an impact. She walked past a group of boys who usually ignored her. Hey, nice job on Friday, one of them said. It wasn't a joke. His tone was genuine. Lily nodded, a small smile touching her lips. Thanks, she whispered. She continued to her locker. When she got there, Brittany was standing at her own locker a few feet away. Brittany had her group of friends around her as usual. Lily tensed up, expecting a cold stare or a mean comment. But Brittany turned around. For a second, the two girls looked at each other. Brittany looked at Lily, really looked at her, and didn't see the weird girl she could make fun of. She saw the girl who had owned the stage on Friday night. That piece you played? It was intense, Brittany said. Her voice wasn't mean, but it wasn't super friendly either. It was just, respectful. Lily was so surprised she almost dropped her books. Thanks, she said again, a little louder this time. I didn't know you could play like that, Brittany added, before turning back to her friends. The conversation moved on, but the interaction hung in the air. It was a small moment, but it was huge. The queen bee of the school had just acknowledged the girl in the AOODIE. Throughout the day, the change continued. In her math class, the teacher, Mrs. Gable, stopped by Lily's desk. I heard you performed beautifully on Friday, Lily. I'm sorry I missed it. We always talk about grades, but it's important to have passion too. You should be proud. Lily sat up straighter in her chair. For years, she had felt like a ghost in this class, just a number on a seating chart. Today, she felt like a person. At lunch, Lily didn't go to the music room immediately. She walked through the cafeteria with her tray, looking for a seat. It was still noisy and crowded, and she still felt a bit anxious. But as she scanned the room, she realized she didn't have to hide. She saw an empty seat at a table where a girl from her history class sat. The girl smiled and motioned for Lily to sit down. It wasn't an invitation to join the popular table, but it was a seat. a place to belong. Lily sat down, and for the first time in high school, she ate lunch with someone else. The rumors that had plagued her before were gone. No one was calling her a disaster. The narrative had completely flipped. Now, when people talked about the piano girl, they talked about talent, mystery, and hidden depths. Lily realized that by refusing to hide who she was, by refusing to be the disaster they expected, she had changed the rules of the game. After school, Lily went to the music room. Mr. Vance was there, organizing some sheet music. He looked up and smiled. "How was the victory lap?" he asked. "It was okay," Lily said, sitting down at the piano. "People were nice. It was weird. People like talent, Lily, but more importantly, people respect bravery," Mr. Vance said. "You stood up there and showed them who you are. That changes how they see you, and it changes how you see yourself." Lily looked at the keys. She realized he was right. The fear of being judged wasn't gone completely. She was still a teenager, after all, but it didn't control her anymore. She knew now that she had a voice. She had power. She placed her hands on the keys and started to play. This time, she didn't play the angry, stormy piece from the talent show. She played something softer, a gentle melody that floated through the room. She played with the same skill, but with a new sense of peace. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. She just wanted to play. From the hallway, a few students passing by stopped to listen through the door. They didn't giggle or whisper mean things. They just paused for a moment, listening to the music, appreciating the girl who had surprised them all. The class had expected a disaster, but they got a lesson in humanity and courage instead. And for Lily, that was better than any trophy. She wasn't just the quiet girl anymore. She was Lily the pianist, and that was enough.